Well, welcome back, folks, to another episode of the History of the Music in the 1950s and 60s, where we're reviewing the soundtrack of our youth, listening to some of those songs that we remember so well as young teenagers and adults. So let's listen to Bob Seger.
Just take those old records off the shelf. I sit and listen to them by myself. Today's music ain't got the same soul. I like that old time rock and roll. Don't try to take me to a disco. You'll never even get me out on the floor. In 10 minutes I'll be late for the door. I like that old time rock and roll.
Okay, let's kind of review what we talked about last week. Last week, we saw how the Motown sound, Berry Gordy's recording studio in Detroit, not only survived, but actually thrived during this British invasion, where the Beatles brought all these acts over and just almost completely wiped out American music. We examined why Motown prospered when so many other record companies did not. And then we listened to several songs either from Motown or inspired by Motown. We listened to the Drifters sing their last big hit, Under the Boardwalk. We also listened to the Four Tops sing their first big hit, Baby, I Need Your Lovin'. We listened to Mary Wells sing My Guy. We saw how a trio from New Orleans, the Dixie Cups, had their only number one hit with the Chapel of Love. We listened to Dionne Warwick begin her legendary career with Walk On By. Saw Martha and the Vandellas follow up their 1963 hit of Heatwave with even more popular Dancing in the Street. And then finally, we finished up with the Supremes, who finally had a hit after languishing for a couple of years with that one, with Baby Love. Great episode. It's one of my favorite episodes I've done. I just absolutely love the Motown sound of the mid 50s, 60s. And if you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to do so. Well, let's look at our trivia question. In 1964, ABC became the first TV network to have a primetime variety show dedicated to showcasing rock and roll acts. What was the name of the show? And I just pulled it up there without the music. Sorry. Shindig was a follow-up to a folk music variety show called Hootenanny, which had outlived its ratings. The Wednesday night TV show will go on to showcase almost every big rock and roll act, including the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Beach Boys, Tina Turner, the Ronettes, the Supremes, Jackie Wilson. If you were a big time rock and roll act, you wanted to go on Shindig. It was followed next year by an NBC show called Hullabaloo, which never really got the success that Shindig did. They only had lasted for a couple of years, but they really kind of had an impact. I can remember watching Shindig as a junior and senior in high school. Well, here is the answer to Mary Wells' My Guy in 1965, performing on Shindig, The Temptations singing My Girl.
I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. I guess you'd say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, my girl, talking about my girl, my girl. I've got so much honey, the bees envy me. Oh yes, I've got a sweeter song than the birds in the tree. Well, I guess you'd say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, my girl, talking about my girl, my girl. Ooh, ooh. that man can claim. Well, I guess you and you would say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, talking about my girl. I've got sunshine on a cloudy day with my girl.
Okay, so there was an episode or an act that was on Shindig. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about those acts that survived the British invasion. Some of them were new, some have been around for a while, as you'll see. One of the kinds of music that kind of began to be popular in the 1964 was something called blue-eyed soul. Now, we've talked about soul music as being primarily a rhythm and blues, kind of gospel-inspired music that was sung primarily by Black singers. But in 1964, you begin to see white singers kind of adopt this, and it became known as blue-eyed soul. Without a doubt, the most popular act of this, kind of genre of music was the Righteous Brothers, a duo composed of Bobby Hatfield and Bill Medley that began singing in 1962 as part of a group known as the Paramours. Well, the Paramours broke up in 1963, but Hatfield and Medley wanted to keep singing, so they began calling themselves the Righteous Brothers. Medley later on said that they took the name because they used to perform at the El Toro Marine Base a lot, and one of the Black Marines from that base yelled up at the stage one night after they got done performing and said that was Righteous Brothers, which was a term that was used a lot back in the mid-60s. And they thought, hey, neat name for a group, so we'll call ourselves the Righteous Brothers. They were signed by Phil Spector's label, and they were popular enough in 1964 that they actually was one of the opening acts for the Beatles when they did their big tour in the fall of 1964. Their first big hit was written by Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil of the Brill Building sound, and was produced by Spector using his wall of sound. Remember, we talked about this, how he actually made the studio an instrument, and we saw it with the Ronettes with Be My Baby, which was a huge, big sound. That song that they recorded was You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling, which after being released in the late 1964, spent several weeks at #1 on the Billboard charts and became the 7th best-selling single of 1964. In fact, the case, it is so popular that historians who keep track of this type of stuff said it has been the most played song on American radio and television in the 20th century. I don't know how they figure that out, but they have a way of figuring that out. As it turned out, a lot of their songs became involved in movies in the 80s and later. If you've seen Top Gun or the sequel to it, Top Gun Maverick, you know that You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling is just a huge part of that movie, both of them. And of course, you've seen the movie Ghost, Unchained Melody, which was another one of their big hits, was a very integral part of that movie, kind of a highlight of that movie. They've been inducted into the Vocal Hall of Fame as well as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, and we'll hear more about the Righteous Brothers as we get into a little bit later years. But right now, let's listen to them sing their big hit of 1964, You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling.
You never close your eyes anymore when I kiss your lips. And there's no tenderness like grief in your fingertips. You're trying hard not to show it, but baby, I know it. You lost that love and feeling. Oh, that love and feeling. You lost that love and feeling. Now it's gone, gone, gone. Oh, oh, oh. starting to criticize little things I do. It makes me just feel like crying. 'Cause baby, something beautiful about it. You lost that love and feeling. Oh, that love and feeling. You lost that love and feeling. Now it's gone, gone, gone. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Baby, baby, I'd get down on my knees for you. If you would only love me like you used to do, yeah. We had a love, a love, a love you don't find every day. So don't let it slip away. Baby, 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 how do you feel? I need your love. I need your love. Yeah, bring it on down. Bring it on down. Bring back that love and feeling. Oh, that love and feeling. Bring back that love and feeling. 'Cause it's gone, gone, gone. And I can't go on. Oh, bring back that love and feeling. Oh, that love and feeling. Bring back that love and feeling. 'Cause it's gone.
Okay, great duo. Well, another new type of music that kind of began to flourish in 1964 in the mid 60s was something called swamp rock. Swamp rock would eventually kind of give way to southern rock, and we all know some of the groups like Leonard Skinner, the Allman Brothers Band that was big in the 70s. The kind of progenitor of that was swamp rock, and the man that's probably associated more than any with the first version of that was a man by the name of John Ramastelia, which we know better as Johnny Rivers. Johnny Rivers had a kind of peculiar singing style. He came from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and his kind of music became known as swamp rock. And returning to Louisiana, he met James Burton, who was bandmate of Ricky Nelson's, later on became Elvis's lead guitarist in his band, the TCL band or TLC band. Introduced Rivers to Ricky Nelson, encouraged him to move to Los Angeles, where he really didn't have much success because it just, for one reason or the other, he just didn't really succeed. And then a man by the name of Elmer Valentine, strange name, kind of appropriate since it's Valentine's Day is coming up here, had just opened a new nightclub on Sunset Strip called the Whiskey A Go-Go. And upon hearing Rivers sing, offered him a 1-year residency. It's a big deal. From there, Rivers' popularity just absolutely took off, and he became a sensation on the American music scene at a time when a lot of others kind of were disappearing, and he kind of ushered in this swamp rock. Rivers released several live albums, 64 and 65, and became a really big hit maker. Topped the chart, several of them, but without a doubt, his biggest song was a cover of Chuck Berry's Memphis that Chuck Berry had recorded back in the 50s. Rivers' version of that song far outsold Chuck Berry's. And then he recorded a theme song for a new TV program called Secret Agent, which was later released as Secret Agent Man, reached #3 on the Billboard chart, sold over 1 million records. You might remember in the 60s, this James Bond effect there were just tons of TV shows about secret agents, and one of them was Secret Agent, and he wrote this song and recorded it. Be the biggest hit in 1967, Poor Side of Town. Continue on into the 70s, never really prospered much after the 60s. 1981, Rivers became a Christian, and most of his music since that time has been gospel music. He still continues to tour, and even though he's been ignored by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is absolutely ridiculous because he was kind of like I said, the whole progenitor of this Southern rock sound that was going to be huge in the 70s. And almost every one of those acts are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But, that's the way the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is. They're very political. He was, by the way, when Chuck Berry died, he was asked to perform Memphis at his funeral in 2017, which was quite a big honor. So let's listen to Johnny Rivers sing his first really big hit, which was the cover of Chuck Berry's Memphis.
It's guest time on American Bandstand, one of the hottest records in the country. No pun intended. In the middle of July, ladies and gentlemen, a song called Memphis, a man named Johnny Rivers.
Long distance information, give me Memphis, Tennessee. Help me find a party that tried to get in touch with me. She could not leave a number, but I know who placed the call. Cause my uncle took the message and he wrote it on the wall. Help me information, get in touch with my Marie. She's the only one who would call me here from Memphis, Tennessee. Her home is on the south side, high up on a ridge, just a half a mile from the Mississippi Bridge. From her eye, but we were pulled apart because her mom did not agree, and tore apart our happy home in Memphis, Tennessee. Help me information, more than that I cannot add, only that I miss her and all the fun we had. Marie is only 6 years old. Information, please. Try to put me through to her in Memphis, Tennessee.
Hey, Johnny, how are you?
Okay. Well, as we've talked, there were some groups and some singers that, survived the British invasion. One of those was the Beach Boys, which we've talked about, and actually became a lot bigger as a result of the British invasion because of their kind of rivalry with the Beatles. Another one was the Four Seasons. The Four Seasons had started out in 1963 with a couple of really big hits, Big Girl Don't Cry and Sherry. It was kind of a mixture of doo-wop and love ballads type thing. They would go ahead and, write another big song called Dawn, Go Away, written by band member Bob Gaudio. He was kept for #1 spot by, I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You. The second big hit they had in 1964 was Ragdoll, also written by the same guy, and it would become their group's biggest hit. He was inspired to write the song when a young girl in ragged clothes approached his vehicle in Hell's Kitchen, New York City, to wash his windows. He went home and he couldn't get her condition out of his mind. She was a beautiful young girl, but she was dressed in just really dirty, raggy clothes. And he decided he was going to write a song called Ragdoll. And incidentally, the flip side of that single was Silence is Golden, which never became a hit for the Four Seasons, did become a hit for a British group called the Tremolos, which reached #1 in the UK and #11 in the United States. 1964 would be the peak of the Four Seasons. They would they would get involved in a lot of controversy. Nick Massey left the group because of creative differences. Another one, DeVito, left the group because of his involvement with the mob, forced the group to kind of financially bail him out. And finally, Frankie Valli, the lead singer, just decided to go solo. And of course, he had a huge solo career on his own and still is. He's still out there singing today. You might remember that in 2005, there was a play written about them called The Jersey Boys. And later on, Clint Eastwood made an award-winning movie about them called The Jersey Boys. If you haven't seen the movie, I encourage you to watch it. It's a great movie. If you like their kind of music, it's a really good movie to watch. But here is Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons singing Ragdoll. Okay. Well, another hit maker, and we've talked about this guy before. He particularly loved ballads. Bobby Vinton. Bobby Vinton, I think we forget just how huge this guy was in the mid 60s. He was just one of the biggest acts on the charts. I mean, he was huge. He really survived the British invasion very well. In fact, his recording of There, I've Said It Again, was the last #1 hit on the Billboard chart before the Beatles began their beatdown of American songs. By the way, that song, which we're going to listen to, was a cover of an old Bon Monroe song, first recorded in 1945. Some of you may remember Bon Monroe. He was a crooner in the Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra era. His other hit in 1964, and written by Benton, was to start a chain of songs that addressed the loneliness felt by servicemen. He really got big into this. He seemed to really get into themes. He had this theme for a long time where he was wrote lots of songs about blue, and then he got writing a lot of songs about loneliness. And it really must have hit a chord, because remember, the Vietnam War was really ramping up in 1964-65. And this song that reached #1 at the end of '64 and spent 15 weeks on the Billboard's Hot 100 list was Mr. Lonely. He followed that song up with Lonely, Long Lonely Nights, and Coming Home Soldier, all of them in 1965. And they all became just huge hits, particularly on the Armed Forces Network. The soldiers really liked Bobby Benton. Finally, he would kind of turn to love ballads again. Would write Please Love Me Forever and I Love You. I Love How You Love Me in the last half of the 1960s. And of course, Bobby Benton just went on to have a huge career, still performing as far as I know. Well, here he is on, I believe it is the American Bandstand, sitting there. I've said it again, the last #1 song on the Billboard chart until the Beatles knocked them off, and from that point on, the British just dominated the charts in 1964. So here is that song by Bobby Benton.
Let's have a look now at the top 10 board in the #10 position. The Boy Next Door by The Secrets holds down that spot. Kansas City by Trinity Lopez, #9, Popsicles and Icicles. I get the biggest kick out of this every time. That is right, no less. That's the way they spell it, the Mermaids. Drip Drop by Dion DeMusy's #7, as usual, by Brenda Lee, moving into 6th spot. Nitty Gritty, last week's guest, Miss Shirley Ellis, has a #5 spot. Forget Him by Bobby Rydell is #4. You Don't Have to Be a Baby to Cry by the Caravels holds the #3 position. The King's Men with Louie Louie, and this is the #1 record.
I love you. There's nothing to hide. It's better than burning inside. I love you. No use to pretend. There, I've said it again. I've said it. What more can I say? Believe me, there's no other way. I love you. I will till the end. There, I've said it again. I've tried to drum up a phrase that would sum up all that I feel for you. But what good are phrases? The thought that amazes is you love me, and it's heavenly. Forgive me for wanting you so, but one thing I want you to know, I've loved you since heaven knows when. There, I've said it again. Forgive me for wanting you so, but one thing I want you to know, I've loved you since heaven knows when. There, I've said it again.
#1 on the American Bandstand Top 10, Mr. Bobby Benton. There, I've said it again.
Okay, Well, as we've seen, folk music was also really big in the early 60s, and Bob Dylan had become the spokesperson for that music. I mean, he was the main man in 1964. But things were changing. In fact, that's the name of an album and a song he wrote called The Times They Are Changing. Bob Dylan in 1964 was going through an identity crisis. If you've never read much about Bob Dylan, he is one of these kind of people that just does not like to be told what he is. He wants to do his own thing. And most of us remember that Bob Dylan we see him as a folk and protest singer. Folks, that was only a very brief part of his career, which is still going on. He's going to be in Springfield, pretty soon. And that was only occupied about a 20-month period between January of 1962 and November 1963. By the beginning of 1964, he would later say that he was feeling very manipulated and constrained by the folk and protest movement. He didn't feel comfortable being the spokesperson. He had an album out called Another Side of Bob Dylan, began to suggest he was kind of embracing rock and roll, which was absolutely anathema to the folkies. One of the songs in there, titled It Ain't Me, Babe, indicated he was rejecting the whole role of being the political spokesman. And then he came out with his first really huge album, The Times They Are Changing, in 1964. And it was here that he really began to kind of break away from the folk music genre. Now, people didn't understand it yet. They thought that he was talking about being the times were changing with civil rights and all. That's not what he was talking about. In this song, The Times They Are Changing, which is the name of the album, he had a song called My Back Pages. And in that, this is one of the verses. And listen to this. Some people say, how could he ever be a Nobel laureate, for literature? Well, listen to this verse. Equality, I spoke the word as if a wedding vow, but I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now. In other words, he's basically saying, hey, I'm not this old person that everybody thinks I am. I'm not this old soul. I'm a young guy. And one person has said it was the most lyrical expression of political apostasy ever penned. I don't know if I agree with that, but it definitely suggests that Bob Dylan was changing. And indeed, as you will see in 1965, he absolutely split with the folk music crowd. When I say that, I mean he literally split with them. Later that summer, 1964, Dylan would meet up with the Beatles in a very recorded incident. With 6 months, the traditional division between rock and folk, as one person said, nearly evaporated as the Beatles fans began to kind of mature in their outlook, and the Beatles music was changing, and Dylan's audience began to embrace electric instrumentation and youth-driven pop culture. It would breed what became known as folk rock, which was gigantic in the late 60s. So here is Bob Dylan singing probably his last big folk song, although it's debatable if it's even a folk song, The Times They Are Changing.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, or the times they are a-changing. Some writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. 'Cause the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing. senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. The battle outside raging will soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing. Mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changing. The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be last, for the times they are a-changing.
Okay, like I've told you, Dylan is an acquired taste for sure. Well, if you remember when we were watching Bobby Benton there with Dick Clark, and he was going through the countdown, the number 2 song at that time was Louie Louie by the Kingsmen. This song had come out in late 1963 and just was a huge hit. Now, there's quite the story behind this song. And maybe it kind of explains why the British invasion, this one and the next song, maybe will kind of explain what was going on, because maybe the young people in America were just ready for a different change. The first song that we're going to talk about is Louie Louie, originally written in 1955 by a man named Richard Berry. And it was intended on the flip side of a song, You Are My Sunshine, a very traditional song. Languished in anonymity until it was redone by doo-wop style by a singer out in the Pacific Northwest. And that version became kind of a regional hit, and the melody was so infectious that it began to be played by just about every garage band in Washington and Oregon. One of those was a group of young kids called the Kingsmen, who literally recorded it in a garage. And the story goes they were so intoxicated when they recorded the song that their words were slurred and the singing became almost undecipherable. But the melody was what it was all about. Somehow began to be played on the radio and just became a huge hit. Third best-selling single of 1963, was still going strong in early 1964. There's an urban legend about Louie Louie. Supposedly, the song, which is about a lovesick sailor's lament to his bartender named Louie, was just full of what was called smutty lyrics. And I can remember about this. I mean, I can remember my preacher talking about this in church. Parents, teachers, preachers, they were just so sure that this song was full of obscenity, but you couldn't really understand it because it was so slurred on the recording. It was such a big deal and such an urban legend about it that J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, got involved and launched a 13-month long investigation trying to find out if this record was full of smutty lyrics. As it turned out, there wasn't anything obscene about it at all. It was just a weird song. But maybe that's, if we'll listen to it, and maybe you can see why maybe people were ready for a change with the British invasion. So let's listen to Louie Louie by the Kingsmen. I can't remember exactly what, I think maybe this was from Shindig.
a fine little girl. She wait for me. Catch a ship across the sea. I said that she'd find my all alone. I never think how I make it home. I said, run, oh no. I said, we gotta go. Yeah, 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 yeah. Run, oh baby. I said, we gotta go. All right now, yeah. You see Jamaica, the moon above. Won't be long, me see me love. I'll take her in my arms again. Tell her I'll never leave again. I said, run away. Oh no, I said, we gotta go. Yeah, 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 yeah. Run away. Oh baby, I said, we gotta go. I said, we gotta go now.
Okay, so it is one of the biggest songs of 1963 and early 1964. The only reason it never reached number one was because another song, which was just as strange in its own right, kept it from getting there. That was Dominique by the Singing Nun. I don't know how many remember this, but I still don't know exactly what was going on in young people's minds that they liked the song. Now, I think it's a good song. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying it's not what you would typically think that young teenagers would like. But it became the ninth best-selling song of 1963, and it was still going strong in 1964. It was recorded by a nun of the Dominican order called Marie Deckers. Her French name was Sister Smile, as she called herself. And she was singing a song about Saint Dominic in French. And it hit number one, kept Louis from being number one. And if that's not weird enough, it wasn't even the only foreign language song to hit number one in 1963. There was another one called Sukiyaki by a guy by the name of Kayu Sakamoto that had already been the eighth bestseller of the year. Just strange times in American music, to say the least. Dominique was just one of several Sister Smile songs that are recorded on an album, songs she had written for her fellow nuns. She didn't write this to be recorded. She just wrote it for her fellow nuns. But for some reason, when it was recorded, it just took off. So big that she actually appeared on the Ed Sullivan's TV show. I remember this. Made a small fortune off of it, about $100,000, which, pretty nice fortune in my opinion. Brought her, unfortunately, kind of pulled her between the two worlds of religion and secularism. There was a lot of people did not like her doing this, a lot of her fellow nuns. In 1966, she left the convent. A lot of people say she didn't have a choice. She just began living, had to leave. She began living with one of her former students who everybody jumped to the conclusion immediately that it was a sexual thing. And she always said, no, it's not. It's platonic. We just like each other and we're going to live together. Later years, she got involved in the Catholic Charismatic Renewal Movement, which was really big in the 70s. That only widened the split between her and her church. I'd like to tell you there was a good ending to this story. There's not. The strain of all this became so much for her that on March 29, 1985, Sister Smile, the singing nun, and her friend committed suicide together. They left a note, said that they had not given up on their faith. They just wanted to be buried together. And it was a really tragic story. It should have been a beautiful story, but it was not. So here is the last song we're going to hear today, which again kind of shows you the state of American music when the British came. The Singing Nun, singing Dominique. Beautiful song. I love the song.
Dominique, nique, s'en allait tout simplement, routier, pauvre et chantant. En tout chemin, en tout lieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu. À l'époque où Jean sans terre d'Angleterre était le roi, Dominique, notre père, combattit les albigeois. Dominique, nique, s'en allait tout simplement, routier, pauvre et chantant. En tout chemin, en tout lieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu. Certains jours, un hérétique par des ronces le conduit, mais notre père Dominique, par sa joie, le convertit. Dominique, nique, s'en allait tout simplement, routier, pauvre et chantant. En tout chemin, en tout lieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu. Ni chameau, ni diligence, il parcourt l'Europe à pied, Scandinavie ou Provence dans la sainte pauvreté. Dominique, nique, s'en allait tout simplement, routier, pauvre et chantant. En tout chemin, en tout lieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu. Enflamma de toute école, filles et garçons pleins d'ardeur, et pour semer la parole, inventa les frères prêcheurs. Dominique, nique, s'en allait tout simplement, routier, pauvre et chantant. En tout chemin, en tout lieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu. Chez Dominique et ses frères, le pain s'en vint à manquer, et deux anges se présentèrent portant de grands pains dorés. Dominique, nique, s'en allait tout simplement, routier, pauvre et chantant. En tout chemin, en tout lieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu. Dominique vit en rêve les prêcheurs du monde entier, sous le manteau de la Vierge en grand nombre rassemblés. Dominique, nique, s'en allait tout simplement, routier, pauvre et chantant. En tout chemin, en tout lieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu. Dominique, mon bon père, regarde-nous simples et gais, pour annoncer à nos frères la vie et la vérité. Dominique, nique, s'en allait tout simplement, routier, pauvre et chantant. En tout chemin, en tout lieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu, il ne parle que du bon Dieu.
Okay, well, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this. Different kind of music. Next week, we're going to finish 1964. 1964 was kind of a strange year. Beside all this British invasion, you saw some pretty tragic incidents take place, and we're going to talk about that. We also saw some really big songs take place, particularly in country music. So that's what we're going to talk about next week, and then we will proceed on into 1965. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I know I have, and we will see you next week, and hopefully you'll tune in.
Good show.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Donna. Bye, Red.
We always enjoy it. Thank you, Tony.
Mhm.